So we're here to talk about ValueArmor. And how did ValueArmor come to be? It was really born out of this belief that we have that easy access to affordable statewide commercial data is essential for doing what you do, which is ensuring fair and equitable taxation. We also believe it helps promote negotiation over litigation, which means everybody wins. As we started down this journey, we found a problem pretty quickly. And that problem is that commercial property data and sales information, it's not readily available outside of your county. And it can also be very expensive. There's other vendors that offer data. And like I said, it can be expensive. It's typically confined to smaller areas like metro areas. And it's also difficult to tell when you're looking at authoritative data and when you're looking at crowdsourced data. There's benefits to both, but the big thing is you need to know what you're looking at. And so we focused right now on the authoritative data. Now, those of you that know me from my previous career will know that or recall that when I talk about data and software, I love to use these three words: organized, accessible, and useful. Those are three words I stole from Google, or rather I borrowed from Google. And it's really what you need to think about when you're building applications, especially that involve this much data. If you want to make the data organized, you want to make it easily accessible, and most importantly, you want to make it useful. So first off, let's talk about organizing the data. What we do is we go through and we collect all the data in a state, for instance, Maryland or Florida, and we put all that data into a common format. Then we filter out the things that are non-commercial. We also go through every record, every sales record, and take out the ones that are invalid sales. We want to make sure we're offering you the best data we can. Once all that data is filtered and standardized, then we merge it into one file and we upload that to ValueArmor. Now that we've got organized data, we want to make it easily accessible. And there's no question the best way to make data easily accessible is through a web platform. With a web platform, in this particular instance, we chose Hexagon Smart Maps. They've got a web-based platform. We built ValueArmor on top of that. There's lots of benefits to web platform. One is there's no software download. You just really need an internet browser. There's Firefox, Google, Internet Explorer, whichever. And you don't have to worry about updates. You don't have to worry about updating the software. You don't have to worry about updating the data. All that happens automatically and instantaneously. So when we make a new change or we update the data, we do it on our end, boom, you get it next time you log in. So there's definitely benefits to a web-based platform making it data accessible. And then while organized and accessible are 2/3 of my favorite words, it's only half the battle. The real meat of this comes in how useful is that data. And that's where applications like ValueArmor come into play and the tools and the features included there. So I won't go over these in too great a detail because we're going to see these live. But you'll see how you can view the attributes for any commercial property across the state. You can search for properties. You can find like properties, such as comps, by filtering the data. You can reveal sales ratio information. And then you can also take the data out and export it to Excel. And once it's in Excel, as you know, you can do lots of different things with it. So what we're going to talk about today, there's actually two versions of ValueArmor. There's ValueArmor Standard and ValueArmor Gold. We're going to focus today on Standard. And that includes a lot of things we just talked about. Access to the statewide data, access to commercial sales information, filtering mechanisms for comps, exporting to Excel, etc. And that comes at $2,400 a year for unlimited users. The Gold Edition is a little bit more expensive, and it includes an AVM value. So all the things in Standard plus an AVM value generated by Patrick O'Connor that we all know through IAAO and some models he's created. If you have questions about the Gold Edition, just reach out to me afterwards and we can talk about that. But like I said, we're going to focus on standard today. So now we're going to jump into the good stuff. We're heading to the live demo. First thing I'm going to do is just kind of take you on a little tour. We'll walk around the interface here and kind of discuss what you're seeing right out of the gate. The first thing is, we've got 242,000 properties across the state of Florida. You'll also notice we've got all these charts kind of around the edge. These charts are all interactive. For instance, if you look at this property type chart and I hit the pink area, which is retail, you'll see now I'm looking at 80,000 points of the 242,000 we had a minute ago. And all the charts work the same way, and we'll kind of walk through those when we go through the different examples. We also have this little 3-bar button in the right corner, and this opens up your menu, and you can do a couple other things with that. I can turn off and on layers. I can also turn off and on the charts. So if maybe I don't want the sales ratio chart all the time, I simply turn that off, or I turn it back on when I need it. You can also export your results to Excel straight from the menu. And I can change my cluster distance on the fly. Which right there is usually where I get my first question, so I'm just going to head that off at the pass, which is, what is clustering? So what clustering is, if you look at the map, you'll see we've got all these really big circles with numbers in them. Those represent clusters. And clusters are a way for us to group points that are in close proximity together, really to cut down on clutter. So you can imagine if you're looking at this zoom angle, 242,000 properties, it's going to be a cluttered mess. You're going to have points all over the place. So what we do is we put them in clusters to help visually not clutter up the map. You'll notice as I zoom in, the application automatically kind of re-clusters. And as you get closer, more and more points appear. But like I said, you can change that on the fly at any time. So let's change that down to 1 if we don't have a whole lot of points in our screen. And now I can see more points. Speaking of points, you'll notice they're all color-coded. Well, those colors correlate with this very first chart, which is property type. So very quickly I can look at and see, well, we got 2 retail properties here because they're pink, 2 industrial properties here that are green, and this purple is office. So just keep in mind, all these points are color-coded. I'm going to change my distance back up to 45. It seems to be a good default to use. All right, now that we've taken a tour of the site, we're going to get right into going through some examples. So I'm going to start with looking at just one county at a time. And this might be a good way for you to review your own data, to see your data in a way that maybe you haven't seen it before. So all I have to do is click a single county. In this case, we're going to click Palm Beach County. You'll see they've got about 14,000 points. Now, what I want to do first is go through maybe some high-level, just checks on my data, see how I'm doing in certain areas. So let's look at apartments. So all I do is simply click the blue area on this top chart, and now I'm looking at 625 apartments in Palm Beach County. Now maybe I want to look at just the ones that have sold. So I click 2015, 2016, these are the last 2 sales years, and now I've got 38 apartments that have sold within those last 2 years. With that, you'll notice the sales ratio chart it changed, and actually I'll do that again just so you see that change. So I'll reset that. If you watch the sales ratio chart, every time I click to change my selection, the sales ratio chart dynamically changes with that. And the benefit of that is I can now look at these 38 and see, do I have any outliers? How's my bell curve look? In this case, most of them fall right within that meaty part of the bell curve where you hope they do. However, I might have a couple potential outliers here. And all I have to do is click on that bar, click that point, and now I can view the information about that particular parcel. I can see that it sold in 2015 for $375,000. The JV or appraised value, we've got at $429,000. So that might be within your acceptable range, or it might not be. And I can do the same thing with the ones that may be underappraised. Look at those, quickly look at the sales ratio. I'm at 0.7 on that one. And now if I want to kind of keep going through my property types, I can just leave the sales selected here, reset my property type, and maybe I want now just do a quick check on retail. Here I can see my sales ratio has changed again. Good thing is you always like to see that green one the highest, because that means you've got a lot of them in that meaty part of the bell curve. But I can see there might be some potential issues here. So I click through these. Let's click this one. So now I can see that there might be some outliers. And this is a good place to make the point that we're not saying here, stop the presses, you've got a problem with your data, there's an issue with these parcels. That's not our job. That's for you guys to decide. You're the experts. What we're doing is we're providing an indicator that there might be something going on here. There might be an error in the data. There might need to be some adjustments made to particular parcels. And more importantly, it might be an indicator that these are your potential appeals. So you might be getting a little bit of a heads up on the ones that are the highest sales ratios, that these are the ones that might be appealed here in the near future. Let's get ahead of it. Let's identify those. Let's work them, make adjustments if need be, or at least prepare for why they're that way. So now let's look, we'll stay in Palm Beach for a moment. And we'll go a little bit more granular. So instead of a kind of wide-arching property type like retail, apartment, or so on, or entertainment, we can now go into property use. So we have a drop-down box. This used to be kind of a search, a text search. And as Palm Beach was using the site, they made a request. We thought it was a great idea, so we modified this to have a drop-down because there's only so many property uses in the state statute. And sometimes you may not remember how they're spelled or what they are, so we thought for ease of use, we made a drop-down. In this case, let's look at our drop-down. Let's go to nightclubs. Hit apply. All right, so I've got 38 nightclubs in Palm Beach. Let's go through the same process, see if any have sold in the last couple of years. We've got 2, one of which falls in that good size curve. One might be just a little bit low. But this is where you commercial appraisers have a challenge that the residential appraisers don't necessarily have. On the residential side, if you're looking for comps, there's typically an abundance of them. On the commercial side, that's not always the case. Usually it's not the case, actually, because they're more unique properties, they're larger properties, and they don't sell as often. So in this case, if I'm looking at these nightclubs and I need to potentially look for some comps to adjust it, I don't have any in my county. So in talking to appraisers, different states, kind of asking, what do you do in this situation? There's usually a couple answers that come about consistently. One is, in this case, Palm Beach, It may go to Broward County to the south, do a quick search on their GIS website, try and find some comps. Now I'm going to the north to Martin County, searching their GIS website, looking for comps. And in Florida, that you can do that because pretty much every county has a GIS website you can search. It's just not very effective. It's very time-consuming. The other option that people say is, well, I subscribe to another vendor that offers this data. And that gets back to, as many of you know, those are big checks you write typically for that data. And a lot of times, as I said before, they are confined to smaller areas. And you don't necessarily know where the data came from, whether it's authoritative or private or what have you. Third option is what we're talking about today, which is ValueArmor. So in this case, I need to go find more comps. I simply deselect my county. And in one click, I can see there's 55 nightclubs that have sold across the state. Now, the ones I was looking at in Palm Beach, they were older properties. So I can say, you know what, let's filter that down to find older properties. I knew what size it was. Send it down to 34, and chances are I may not be too concerned with the ones up here in Pensacola. But the good news is I've got several right here in South Florida. So what I can do is I can now draw a box using a spatial selection tool. Just grab those nine properties. And from here I can either look at them individually, or I can just go straight to my export, hit attribute data, open up the Excel file, and let's see, Palm Beach, so this was my subject property. And now I can go through and I can compare side by side all these properties from across South Florida. I can look at the JV, I can look at the improvement quality, assessed tier, property age, sales ratios, and so on. So I've got a true side-by-side comparison. So while this isn't necessarily a polished, comp report like we're used to seeing in real estate, it's kind of a raw comp report so that I can identify which ones are the best for my property. So I'm done with this particular exercise as far as looking at one county. All I have to do now, I can either go and reset each of these charts, or I can just go to filters, hit reset all. I'm wiping the slate clean. I get to start over and go through something else. So let's kind of walk down our chart list here on the left. We also have owner name. So this is one of the areas we spent some time in as far as making the data organized, is we wanted to go through and make it easier to search for owners. We found with, let's say, Lowe's, for instance, or Walmart, each county tends to call them something different. It may be Lowe's Home Centers. It may be Lowe's Home Center. A lot of times it's Lowe's number 54. So we didn't find that very useful. So we went through and standardized all of that so that if I want to search for Lowe's, I'm going to type in Lowe's here in this owner name box. There's Lowe's Home Centers. Hit apply. And now I've got access to 97 Lowe's across the state. Let's say we do the same thing with Walmart. Walmart stores. Hit apply. 237 of them across the state. So we want to get you the information you want in the quickest way possible. I'll show you one more because I like this example, and I've found similar errors in multiple states, oddly enough, with 7-Eleven. So if I click 7-Eleven, we'll see a whole bunch of 7-Elevens in the south part of the state. But one thing that kind of jumps out at me, and that's what good visualization does, it makes things just kind of jump out at you. Whether it's a sales ratio chart that you can see very quickly, I've got some issues, or it's a pie chart here for property type. I can see I've got a purple sliver in my property type. And in theory, all the 7-Elevens should be the same property type. In this case, they're all coded retail in Florida. I've got one purple one right here. So if I click that, I can take a look and see, well, there's a 7-Eleven that's coded something different than everybody else has it coded in the state. It's a professional service building. Now, I did my due diligence here, and I went to the address, went to Google Street Maps to verify, is this a 7-Eleven or is it maybe an office building called 7-Eleven? And this is actually a gas station. It's your very typical standard 7-Eleven. So it's just coded wrong. And that happens quite a bit. And like I said, for some reasons, I've seen the same thing in Maryland with 7-Elevens, that some of them are just coded different. So this is another great way to kind of just look at your data, maybe in a way you haven't seen before, and identify where you might have outliers, identify where some codes might be off, and just kind of improve data overall. So let's reset our charts again. I'll show one more example. Kind of what we did at a county level, except you can do it at a state level. So you don't have to start with your county. I can say, you know what? I want to look at all the industrial sites across the state, maybe the newer ones that are the largest. So with just a few clicks, I click industrial. Let's grab ones that are, say, under 43 years old. And let's do the largest ones. And I want the ones that have sold, so I want to look at ratios. And just with a few clicks, I now have 71 industrial properties across the state under 43 years old that are over 85,000 square feet. From here, I can take the sales ratio chart, and now I can kind of highlight the ones that just might need to be reviewed. So I've got 7 in the state right here, kind of middle part of the state, that may be under or overappraised. If I zoom out, I can either do what we did earlier, I can just export these to Excel, or if I put them all in one cluster by zooming out, I can click this point, or this number 7 here, and now just right there on the screen, I've got a spreadsheet view of all 7 of those properties. I can sort them by anything. Maybe I want to sort it by sales ratio, and just do a quick side-by-side comparison of those properties. And again, I could keep going all day long. I mean, there's so many different, I'm sure I could do some mathematical calculation on how many different options there are for them, but there's a lot. I'll just say that. You can imagine there's just a lot you can do.